Hi, I'm Ron Timmermans, one of the many hosts with the Florida Aviation Network, and I'm at Sun and Fun in Lakeland, Florida, and I'm glad that you're joining us today. If you're coming to Sun and Fun, this is going to be a fabulous day for you. You get a lot of people to see, airplanes to look at, air show this afternoon, vendors that were happy to sell you things and show you the newest products. This is great. But if you're not able to make it to Sun and Fun today, at least you're joining us on the Florida Aviation Network. So thank you for joining us. We're broadcasting live and in the clear from a studio at the Central Florida Aerospace Academy, the high school on the Sun and Fun campus here. And so it's a great place to get to know some aviation personalities that we'll be introducing to you. One of them is with me here today, Lt Col Trevor Boswell. He's with the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD as it's called.
Well done, Ron. Yes, that's right. Yes, sir. You can just say NORAD from here on out.
I practice. I will say NORAD from now on. It's a lot easier. So how long have you been with NORAD or signed at NORAD?
I've been there a little over 3 years, and obviously the challenges of COVID and everything have made it a little more difficult to get to and from the building and everything like that. But yeah, about a little over 3 years.
Very good. Yeah. So prior to that, you were at a flying job, you said?
Yeah, I flew F-16s during my about 12 and a half years of active duty, and then a little bit here in the Air Force Reserves. I'm a reservist in the United States Air Force, and then I'm also a commercial airline pilot on my civilian job.
Very good. So you fly with one of the commercial airlines right now, you said?
I do, yeah.
Okay, and then reservist with NORAD.
Correct.
Very good. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Well, thank you for your service to our country and the active Air Force, and you're continuing as a reservist. This is good. Right. So many people have heard or seen the acronym NORAD, but probably some of us don't completely understand what NORAD is, what its history is, what its mission is. Can you kind of enlighten us and give us some background, please?
Yeah, definitely. So NORAD began in 1958 and kind of as a response to the Cold War and basically the Soviet threat at the time, and basically looking for a standing ready force to be able to protect the continental United States, the state of Alaska, Canada, and is a binational command with the country of Canada. So we have both Canadian and U.S. personnel that operate out of our facility on Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And so we've been going on for, lots of years, and looking at the various threats that we find, both outside the country and since 9/11, now looking inward inside the country. That was a big inflection point for us when it came to our mission of the aerospace defense.
So before 9/11, the threat was always perceived as being from outside the country coming in towards us,
exactly.
Missiles or aircraft, enemy aircraft and the like. But after 9/11, we realized that sometimes the enemy is right among us.
Exactly. Yeah, we all take an oath of office that includes threats within the country as well. So we've kind of made that our mantra at NORAD as well, to look both outward and inward a little bit.
But even today, I would imagine you're monitoring threats from outside the country, right? I mean,
absolutely. That part has never changed,
exactly.
and thus far we've been very successful at preventing anything from happening.
Yeah. So threats from within the country, I would imagine has to do with temporary flight restrictions and the like. I mean, people
Definitely.
Violating those either inadvertently or purposefully, I suppose. So
Definitely.
Tell us about what pilots can do to a better job of flight planning or whatever, so that we don't have this intercept thing that would be scary for most pilots.
Yeah, so we kind of look at it from three different perspectives when it comes to preparing to go fly. So all of the certificated pilots are going to do the basic stuff, check the weather, you're going to check the NOTAMs, and that's the one we really harp on. That's exactly why we're here, trying to get that message across. Hey, let's do some really good flight planning to avoid this completely. Temporary flight restrictions are a 30-mile protected airspace, and then within that 30-mile, there's a 10-mile ring around the thing that we are protecting that is a no-fly zone. So within that 10 to 30 miles, you do have the ability to transit and go to and from that airspace, but there are some rules and procedures that you need to follow. And so we're trying to educate and get a little bit of buy-in from the general aviation population to prevent issues going on in the future. And a lot of that stems from just awareness, basic awareness, and that comes, is gained by checking your NOTAMs. And then it is, hey, what is your flight plan, and make sure you're following it, and talking to the appropriate agencies, squawking the appropriate transponder codes, and then following your flight plan, actually flying the flight plan that you were instructed to fly or plan to fly.
Yeah, so a TFR, a temporary flight restriction, doesn't mean it's an absolutely no fly through there.
Correct.
There is a restricted area where there's no fly zone, the inner 10-mile radius or
10-mile radius, yeah,
10
we
mile
put a
radius,
10-mile ring, but yeah, 10-mile radius from the
And
protected
then
area.
but from 10 to 30, you can fly through there, if you're on a flight plan, VFR or IFR, and
Correct.
have a discrete squawk code.
Yep, and then the
of
third
course-
piece is then talking to air traffic control
Exactly.
and flying the flight plan that you planned on flying.
So this is not rocket science.
Not really.
I mean,
no.
we
And it's
shouldn't-
a lot
we shouldn't-
scarier. I think everybody sees that red circle on the maps and charts and whatnot, and they get really a little concerned. It is a little bit of a change, but it's nothing really all that non-standard.
And there are places where pilots can look and determine where TFRs are or plan to be scheduled.
Absolutely, yeah.
So-
The FAA has their website that you can go and check all the standard NOTAMs, and then within that you can look and search and select the TFRs, and they will show you the list of TFRs. A good reference point for that, if you just as a baseline, is www.norad.mil/general-aviation. Again, a lot of words there, but that has all the information that we normally present at our presentations here at Sun and Fun and the other air shows that we attend, as well as a printable kneeboard card that you all can print off at home and take that with you, which includes on one side all the flight planning websites and procedures that you need to follow, and on the other side is if you do violate it or there's confusion or you go NORDO or some issue brings a fighter off your left-hand wing, the procedures for how to interact with that fighter and be intercepted and hopefully defuse the situation safely.
Indeed. So another place that we could get TFR's locations is on using our iPad with ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot.
And that's been a huge help for us, just for everybody's awareness. Yeah, absolutely. Those are huge SA situational awareness building tools, and we highly recommend. Do a quick update right before you close the door on cell service or whatever you have for data collection, and make sure you got the most current and up-to-date thing. You should get about a 48-hour notice of when a TFR comes into existence, but you never know. Sometimes things pop up last minute.
Yeah, there's a few, I suppose, now far fewer pop-up TFRs than there were
Correct.
right after 9/11, as we kind of transitioned to this temporary flight restriction. Now we got plenty of notice generally.
Correct.
And we can get it on our iPads before we even leave the house and drive into the airport. So
Exactly.
that's very beneficial. So, and then if we see a TFR, that doesn't mean that we can't go through part of it if we're talking with someone on a flight plan and have a discrete squawk code and the like, and just listen to the ATC controller for directions.
Exactly.
Always can ask, say, is this TFR still in force, and can I go through it? Do I need to go around it? Can you give me a vector around it or something like that if there's a concern?
Definitely.
But let's say we've inadvertently forgot to check or blundered into one. So what would we expect to see, and what should I do as a pilot if I were to get in that situation? I'm asking for a friend.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So let's just go with your radios quit for some reason. So you're a NORDO out there. So what you can expect is if you're not talking to air traffic control, you're maybe on the same flight plan, but you go in here into that TFR and you aren't talking to somebody. They're gonna get a little concerned. They're gonna try to reach out to you on the frequency that they have for that airspace.
And then on
they can't-
guard, I imagine.
and then they'll also be trying to reach out to you on guard. So if you have two radios, we always recommend that you monitor 121.5 on that second radio, just to be on the safe side. At that point, depending on how close to the threat and how threatening you look in your aircraft, they may launch some fighter aircraft from the local alert facility, and they will respond by sending out typically a two-ship of fighter aircraft, either F-16s, F-15Cs, F-22s, or if you're in Canada, because this also includes Canada, they have CF-18s up there as well, and they will expect to intercept you. They'll try to VID you and visually identify you. They have targeting pods on the bottom of the aircraft that they use to try to figure out what you are, who you are at range. But they're going to come up on your left-hand side. You'll have one aircraft on the left-hand side, and you'll have another aircraft about 3 miles behind you that's kind of weaving behind you to maintain that positioning and evaluate how threatening you are.
Yeah. So here's a shot that we're watching now as an aircraft comes up on the side for an intercept, and so
they're going to initially approach on the left-hand side because we expect that's where the pilot in command is going to be. That aircraft's going to rock its wings to get your attention. And if you do respond to it, what we'd expect if you're NORDO is to rock your wings to let them know, hey, that we know what's going on, and then give them the visual signals to let them know that, like, hey, I've got a radio problem. Just write it on a piece of paper and stick it against the window. Whatever you need to do to try to get your point across if you can't talk to them.
Yeah.
If it's just a matter of, like, your radio was on the wrong frequency and you just didn't know, then immediately go over to 121.5 on your primary radio and talk to that fighter, because that's what their communication frequency is going to be.
That's good. So that's good to know. The guard frequency, or 121.5, is the way you could communicate if all else failed and you couldn't talk with anybody or were on the wrong frequency and the like. So let's say I see the wing rock and I do the wing rock and I do this, or I put something on a piece of paper or something like that. What am I expected to do then? Follow the...
So like you saw in the video, you saw the aircraft kind of turning away from that. That is your indication. There you go. So that's the initial intercept kind of mentality, and then you see it kind of peeling off to the left-hand side. They want you to follow them. Obviously, you're not in a fighter aircraft yourself, most likely, so we don't expect you to keep up, but we do expect you to point and go in that same direction. Throughout this entire procedure, if something is outside of an aircraft limit or it is unsafe to do so, then don't do it. Safety is paramount. And then the other thing we really try to harp on is remain predictable. Don't do anything that's overly aggressive or anything else that wouldn't be in the guise of normal flight for you.
Exactly. That would certainly make sense as well. So good. So do you have any idea how many intercepts do you do a year or a month? Or?
So that one, we have a lot of metrics that we track, just for figuring out how to best educate the general aviation population. We kind of figure that we have 2 to 3 launches of aircraft a week at sites all around North America. We don't necessarily always get to the point where the aircraft intercepts the general aviation aircraft. The fighter aircraft doesn't always actually visually engage with the general aviation aircraft.
But you've launched, nevertheless.
But we have them launched, exactly. And so then there are a lot of other circumstances where, like, we get to that point, we're about to launch, and then the aircraft starts talking to us or something like that. So primarily the starting point for everything is the local air traffic controller on site, on station. And then there are certain thresholds of safety and security that they are evaluating before they start calling us at headquarters to make that determination to launch aircraft or not.
So if I'm an air traffic controller looking at my screen and I see the TFR outline in there and I see aircraft heading for it, I try and talk to him.
Exactly.
Right? And if for some reason I can't reach him or can't get him to respond, I see that aircraft getting closer and closer. At what point as a ATC controller do I come to NORAD and get you engaged?
It very much depends on what the thing is that we are defending. The aircraft itself that is the violating aircraft, what they are doing, how fast they're traveling, how threatening they are looking towards the thing we're trying to defend, and that. So there are a lot of different matrices that we kind of have to go through, that the local controllers have to go to before they pick up the horn and call us. But that being said, if it does get to that point where they need to launch somebody, the intercept takes place. If that aircraft is not responsive, it could be a medical condition, somebody could have had a heart attack and collapsed or something like that. Then as they get to that point of no return, there's going to be a final maneuver called a headbutt maneuver. It sounds much more aggressive than it actually is, but instead of turning away from the aircraft, they're going to turn across the nose and deconflict high or low, typically high, and then they're going to dispense flares out from underneath the fighter aircraft to, again, give that final bit of awareness chance for that general aviation pilot. So you can see that up there on the video there as well. Yeah, and that's that headbutt maneuver, and they're doing everything they can to get you to go where they need to be. And just remember, the guy that you see is not the one that you should be most concerned about. It's the guy that's about 3 miles behind you that's just waiting to see if you're going to respond or not, and hopefully you respond.
Yeah. Oh, good. So that's the one you see. But knowing that there's another one behind you is probably a good idea as well.
Absolutely.
Well, that's good. So again, the controller is looking at an aircraft approaching at 110 knots. It's probably a Cessna 172 or something like that.
Yeah.
In and of itself, probably not a big threat, but if it's headed towards a presidential TFR, that's certainly of concern.
Yes.
And so they call NORAD, or they somehow get in touch with you.
They have a direct line.
Direct line. Mm-hmm. And so you do some quick evaluation and determine that it's worthy of launching an aircraft?
Yep, so there's those matrices of threats and the other considerations they're making, and then they'll make that choice to launch the aircraft. Those aircraft will be up in the air very quickly. Every location is a classified response time. Sure. But depending on how far away the threat is, how quickly it's moving, they may launch it earlier. If it's a really fast-moving aircraft that can cruise really fast, they may launch that aircraft, the fighter aircraft, sooner, because it will take less time for the threat aircraft to reach the target. So they need faster response time.
So NORAD then is a centralized location for deciding about the threat and where to launch from. Is that correct?
Yeah. So they'll make the determination based on the local area. So we have Air National Guard units that support us with fighter aircraft, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., here in Florida, in Houston, Texas, Colorado, and all around the country within a few sites in Canada as well, and then in Anchorage also. And so we have all those fighter aircraft, and depending where the threat is, they will launch those. We have tanker support for the aircraft if they need to stay airborne. Sometimes we don't have ground alert launch aircraft. We have pre-positioned aircraft overhead that sit combat air patrol over top of presidential TFRs and things if they are in a non-standard or slow response time, or long response time, I should say, distance away from the place.
If you can't get the assets there quick enough.
Correct, yeah. So they have a tanker aircraft to support them and things. And then we also have airborne E3 aircraft, the AWACS aircraft that will use their radar to help support and view things if the terrain is challenging to see with ground-based radar.
So this is a really, really big deal here. So
it is.
As general aviation pilot, like I am, and many of us that are listening as general aviation pilots as well, I would think that we'd have a good respect for TFRs and a desire not to violate them. And so we've learned from Trevor about what happens in the process of intercepting aircraft, launching it, deciding whether or not to launch, and then launching it, getting it there, and the like. And so if there's one thing that comes to mind is these assets are wonderful to have, but it is very expensive to launch them, I'm sure. And so these are your tax dollars and mine at work. And so if I just foolishly enter into a TFR and they launch aircraft, it's amazing how many tax dollars of mine and yours that I've wasted in doing that. Sure, but it is necessary because we do need to protect the assets and the like. So it's not just presidential TFRs, but we also have TFRs over firefighting locations.
Yeah, definitely out in the west during the summer, you'll see TFRs that are set up, and really those are just designed to keep general aviation or sightseers away from fires. It is an interesting thing you want to go see. You want to see the operations and things, but the primary reason is safety. And again, like I said before, everything we do, we want everybody to remain safe, and that includes staying out of TFRs if you have no business being there. Sightseeing is great,
but even firefighting TFRs, they're announced 48 hours or something like that. They don't just pop up.
Correct, yeah. So again, 48 hours is or more prior to when the event's taking place or when the TFR needs to be enacted is when those should populate.
Yeah, okay, good. So what if something like this happens at nighttime, Trevor? Is there some way that you can alert pilots, or is there certain locations where you can alert pilots through some type of laser or?
So airborne-wise, no. Typically we don't have anything airborne that happens, like you're seeing on the video right now. There are ground-based things, but those are primarily for clearance to land types of situations out of the control tower. They do use those lasers like you see there, depending on the airspace and things, but typically that's not going to be something that general pilots, I probably wouldn't recognize it either as something that I needed to respond to, but they do exist. They're just not that common, and they're usually disregarded.
Possibly over the Washington, D.C. freeze
area? The SFRA, the Special Flight Rules area over Washington, D.C. is a primary use of that kind of
lasers.
Asset, if you will. Yeah.
So as a GA pilot, if I'm flying along and I see a laser at night, it would be a strong laser, not just one of the handheld ones where someone's trying to get my attention.
It won't be a laser. It'll just be a very bright, intense light. But that being said, that would be a prime spot to go see that. The other assets that we have specifically in the Washington, D.C. area actually have helicopters. So some of their Coast Guard assets that are based at Reagan International Airport are based out of there to support our mission. So they are available for us to use. They have boards on the side that are the message boards that have lights that will say, hey, switch to 121.5 or land now, or some basically verbal text communication.
These are boards on the side of what?
On the side of Coast Guard helicopters.
Of Coast Guard helicopters. Okay, so that's good.
So and they'll show up on your left-hand side and give you hopefully the message that you need to make the smart choice.
Got it.
Yeah.
Finally, Trevor, I want to ask you about your special mission that occurs in late December.
Yes, yeah,
And
this is a
it's,
critical one. This
unique-
is probably the
unique
one
to-
we spend the most time focusing on towards the Thanksgiving to Christmas timeframe, and that is making sure that Santa can navigate the airspace properly, but he also complies with all the procedures that we have in place as well.
Yeah.
And so just like all the regular general aviation pilots out there, Santa's has to adhere to all the same FAR rules and everything else like that. And so we help navigate that. You can go to, if you have an Amazon Echo device, you can ask where's Santa during that time frame, and Alexa will tell you what's going on there. But you also can go to our Santa Tracker website on NORAD.mil.
And a lot of young people
review
do that. Go
also.
to the Santa Tracker website to see that Santa's on his way, and be assured when they go to sleep that
Absolutely.
on December 24th that Santa will safely make it to them. So I'm glad
Exactly.
that's a great mission. I'm glad that you readily accept that. And I would imagine that Santa attends a number of wing seminars in December and November,
He
December.
does a lot of like Zoom calls. He does
Yeah.
a lot of Zoom call in, but yeah, he's well versed in all the rules.
Good. And uses his iPad to check for TFRs so he doesn't inadvertently go through them.
Exactly.
So I imagine an F-16 would have to really slow down to come up on the left side of the sleigh, wouldn't he?
You'd be surprised how fast those reindeer can go.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
pretty speedy. I mean, he's got to go cover the whole world in one night. So
That's right. I guess he is pretty
Yeah,
fast.
yeah.
That's good. That's good. Well, it's a great mission, and one that's viewed by a lot of folks and interesting. So this has been good. So NORAD's been around since 1958. So that's what 65 years now.
70-ish, something
70s,
like that.
yeah, 60, yeah, 75 years.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing length of time. Mission changed somewhat after 9/11, but still very important mission for the defense of our country.
Exactly.
I was interested to understand that the interaction with the Canadian government as well, the Canadian military forces. So it's a cooperative effort
Very much
with our
so.
neighbors to the north and the like. So they're helping protect them and us, and we're helping protect us and them. So that's a
Absolutely.
good thing for us indeed. Well, if you're a pilot and you're ever interested in avoiding a TFR, which should be every flight, know that the thing that you can do is to find out where the TFR is before you leave. Do your appropriate flight planning, and then you won't have to deal with an F-16 or an F-15 on your left wing and have to worry about all that paperwork that might be involved afterwards. So be safe, and stay out of TFRs, and respect our rights to fly as a pilot in the areas that we can and should not go to. Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Boswell with the NORAD, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for your service to our country, and enjoy flying with the airlines. I'm sure you are. How many hours total?
Oh man, at least 4,000.
4,000, good for you. All right. Well, I'm Ron Timmermans, one of the many hosts with the Florida Aviation Network. It's been a pleasure having you join us today. Please stay tuned for additional interviews later in the day, live and in the clear from the Sun and Fun campus at Lakeland, Florida. Ron Timmermans for the Florida Aviation Network. Come join us again.